it's a good time that spans all time zones, but there we are. Right. So I'm not sure if some of you came to the last one I did of this, probably in October, but today we're going to talk about building relationships at scale, and why it's the foundation for a thriving culture. So I use a practical model that we'll go through. So we'll just see if, there we go. Ooh. Yeah. So this is one of 4 sessions that I've done around sort of key approaches to meaningful engagement. So relationship building I did first, which we're doing again today. I've done one on strategic flexibility and planning for 100% engagement, done one around leveraging engagement networks and social influence within your organization. And if you didn't attend them, we do have them on our YouTube channel, and we can include them in the follow-up email with the replay if you'd like to have a look at those. So aim for the session today. So we're going to talk about why building relationships should be a primary engagement objective and a continuous effort, how to build meaningful relationships at any scale, how to better understand the health of your relationships with your people, and how to start this approach in your daily work right away. So I'll give you some tools that you can start using today if you'd like. So I'm just going to go over a couple of sort of key ideas here around engagement. So traditionally, engagement tends to focus on what we're trying to do, and it's more of a tick box style exercise. So, if we're delivering on something or there's a change happening, we tend to just create a list. What are all the ways we can engage with people versus, taking a step back and being really clear on why we're engaging with people and how we should be going about it. So what are our approaches? I wanted to also clarify what is engagement before we move forward. So sort of a word that everyone has their own idea of what it means to them. But from the perspective today, we're going to talk about how engagement is more of an umbrella concept that incorporates all of any interaction we may have with someone. So whether it's, broadcast communications or an email or one-to-one conversations or, any interaction we may have with someone. Now, when, because often, if you're with an organization, they'll be like, oh, well, that was the billing department and we're the communications department. And in reality, to a customer or a client or a stakeholder, you're one organization. So any interaction that they have with you or any team to them, is the same organization. So they don't see it as, sort of differentiated relationships. Now, every interaction we have with someone makes or breaks trust. And so when we think about all of these ways, because often organizations will separate communications and engagement, for example, but in reality, the sum of all of these interactions that we have together determine the quality of our relationships. And I use the word engagement as an umbrella for all of that. Why is building relationships so important? So I just love this quote from Harvey Mackay, who's a very well-known businessman in America. And he says, the quality of your life is determined by the quality of your relationships, and your business is so no different. And this is so true. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. So we talk about improving relationships and building relationships, but as individuals, we all have an idea. We all have our own thoughts and experiences with what makes a good relationship. So we focus on what we know. And so sometimes if you're sort of looking within an organization and you're, let's say, as a leader, you want to say, yeah, I want to build relationships with your staff, and you speak to all of the managers and you say, we're all going to start building relationships. Well, everyone may go about that in their own way, and which again would be how they would build a relationship with themselves, but that may not work across the board. So I found this really brilliant model a few years ago. It's by a Canadian psychologist named Gordon Neufeld, and It is, so he developed it a long time ago, and he said that it is the core foundation for all these 6 stages for all relationships in your life, regardless of who they are. So could be your spouse, could be your colleague, could be your line manager, could be your client, etc. What each of these stages looks like will vary depending on, who your relationship is with, but that these are all the 6 stages. I've modified it slightly so it's more appropriate to the sort of workplace, but essentially these are all the same six stages. So we're just going to read through these briefly. They're all really familiar concepts. I don't think there's anything on here that anyone's going to sort of, struggle to understand, but it's just a really easy and brilliant model to follow to help you build relationships. And you can use this at any scale. You can use this with one person. You can use this with a team. You can use this with your organization, with your family. So it's really scalable and easy to use. So we'll just sort of go through it quickly. So connection. So this is just the most basic stage. So this is the building consistency and familiarity with the people around you. So it's letting them know that, they're important, and staying in touch with them and keeping them informed and updated, and maintaining a relationship with them is important. The next is shared values, goals, and interests. So this is about really connecting with other people on, what connects you, what you share. So, it could be organizational values, goals, and interests, but, with employees, part of, engaging people is also engaging the human spirit. So you could also connect around personal interests. Lots of places I worked had different social groups, for example. One place I worked at, there were a lot of people playing Dungeons and Dragons at lunch, and everyone quite liked that. So anyway, it's just figuring out what connects you, because then you look to each other for what connects you in general. Belonging and loyalty. So this is just feeling unconditionally accepted and comfortable for who you are. This drives 2 things that are really important. One is intrinsic motivation. So I feel more motivated to be involved at work, in my role, in workplace initiatives, that type of thing. And it also is the biggest factor in improving employee well-being. Significance. So this boils down to I matter. And my experience matters. So they feel very appreciated, and sort of that they're valued for who they are in the team and in the organization. We're going to, just so you know, we're going to talk about what these things look like when they're nurtured or when they're not, because you're probably thinking through, what does this look like? So we're going to talk about that in a little bit. The next one, and this is probably the most important one, is care. We build relationships because we want to build trust, and we want to build influence with our people, and we want to build, employee satisfaction, and, having a thriving organization. And according to Paul Zak, who is a neuroeconomist, he wrote the book, The Trust Factor, which is a really brilliant book. And he says that care explains 84% of organizational trust. So this is a really important stage. And then the last one is being known. So, when we talk about implementing initiatives in organizations, and we always want people to jump in and be involved and tell us everything that they're concerned about, and and that really requires a level of trust that often we don't have with people. Organizations don't have with their people. And this is actually the stage that we assume we are at with our stakeholders, when in reality, we're not. We have to put the rest of the work in to get to the being known stage. That's when people are, and it's the culmination of the other 5 stages, where people feel that they trust you, you have influence with them, they want to be involved, they're ready to be involved, they're ready to share with you how they're feeling and what their concerns are. So I often use the analogy of moving house. So the being known is sort of this idea that, if you were to move house, who would you call? Who would show up? Because it requires a level of meaningful engagement and relationships with people for them to show up for you. Um, if you went into work, if your office said, "Oh, we have an emergency and everything in the office needs to be moved to another office. Can everyone come in on Saturday and help move at, in a voluntary capacity?" How many people would show up, right? And then how much effort would go into in convincing one person to show up, or 100 people to show up, or 1,000 people, or 10,000 people. Um, so yeah, so because otherwise you end up being the person or the friend who calls when they want something, and we all know how we feel when that happens, when that phone rings and um, that person's name shows up, you're like, oh, what do they want now, right? So that's normally where we are when we think we're in the being known stage, and we're not. So this is a really great model to get you there. The thing is it needs to be a consistent effort. um Sorry, it needs to be a consistent effort, because if not, um people can't get ready for change in a really quick fashion. So if you're consistently nurturing these stages, because change is a constant, let's be fair, we treat it as discrete events, but there's always change happening. So if you're always working on these stages and working on building relationships, when change does happen, people are ready to be involved. So, it's great. We looked at all of those stages, fantastic. But how do we know how we're doing in each of these areas? So I've put together a bit of a diagnosis tool, which I'll share with everyone. Here, I have it here. I will move it over here. There we go. So like I said, I'll send this along, but just so you can see. So what I've pulled together here is each of the stages, some examples in practice, and then the second and third column are what it looks like when it's done well and what it looks like when it needs improvement. I won't go through the whole thing, but I will pull out some of the common observations that organizations see when they're implementing change or they're trying to get people involved in a large initiative. The Actually, so these three middle ones are probably the biggest. So often people will say to me, we're trying to get feedback, but no one's responding. So usually what that means is that your belonging stage needs some work. Here, it says people feel ignored. They show difficulty connecting with each other, are withdrawn, and stop giving feedback when asked, as they feel their input is rarely considered. So that's an indicator, for example, that the belonging stage needs some planning and some attention. Significance is the other probably most common one that I hear, is that they'll say, when we ask for feedback, the response we get is very critical, very angry, really unconstructive responses. And so that tends to be when people don't feel like they matter. So this is significance again. They don't feel like they matter. They don't feel like their experience matters. And what they do is they then lash out in order to feel significant. They try to diminish others or the organization in order to feel significant. So if that's happening, then there needs to be a lot of work done around how can we make people feel more significant. Care. People feel that so sometimes when people, this is quiet quitting, I think I would call it. when people are, because it's talked about a lot these days. So with quiet quitting, people are there, but they're not really, they don't care, do they? They come in, they do as little as possible, and they go home. And often that happens when they feel like their organization doesn't care about them, or their team manager or leaders, they don't care about them. Then they just think, I mean, the human response is, well, I don't care either. And that's why this is such an important piece of trust, right? That's when the trust really falls apart. So that's a really big one as well. So those are the three most common sort of areas where I hear, organizations, could use a little more help, would be those three areas in particular. But like I said, I can send this around for you to have a look at. It's not wanting to let me pull down. The little toolbar is in the way. Anyway, and then I have like a health check document where you can look at this and then actually go through each stage, and it'll help you map out where you think you are, and what the key challenges are for you, and then what strategies you could look at. So it's just a helpful health check document here. This does not want the document to go away. There we go. Okay, sorry. Back here. There we go. So yes, so what are the 6 stages? How do we know how we're doing in each of those 6 stages? This is the health check document that I was trying to show you that didn't want to come up. It will allow you, like I said, to go through each stage and just take a step back and reflect on how you think you're doing. And the beauty of using the relationship building framework is that you can do this without specifically asking these questions. You can weave these things into other questions or dialogues that you're having with your people. Like, for example, within Harkn, we can actually ask questions on the wall in particular. And if you're not sure how you're doing, or if you want to see if there's any ways to improve, you can start weaving in questions under each of these stages that you can ask on the wall, to get regular feedback on that. But to be thorough, if you're looking at what's happening on the wall every day within Harkn, because it's continuous dialogue, you'll see patterns of behavior around these. And because to be able to see how you're doing in each of these stages without collecting regular feedback or doing any continuous listening, it can be trickier to see what behaviors are dominant in your organization. What are people saying? How are people behaving? Because it will tell you a lot without actually having them to ask them specific questions about each of these stages. Is quite useful. Yeah.